Welcome to the Lend Academy podcast, episode number 275. This is your host, Peter Renton, founder of Lend Academy and co-founder of Lend It Fintech. Today's episode is sponsored by Lend It Fintech LATAM. The region's largest fintech event dedicated to lending and digital banking is going virtual. It's happening online on December 8th and 9th. Pandemic or not, LATAM is still the hottest region for fintech in the world, and Lend It Fintech LATAM features all the leading players in the region. So join the LATAM fintech community online this year, where you will meet the people who matter, learn from the experts, and get business done. Lend It Fintech. Lending and banking connected. Sign up today at lendit.com/LATAM. Today on the show, I am delighted to welcome Asheesh Birla. He is the SVP of Product at Ripple, and he's also the General Manager of RippleNet. He's part of the executive team and was actually one of the first employees at Ripple way back in 2013. I wanted to get Asheesh on the show because Ripple is becoming a more and more important part of the fintech ecosystem. I wanted to dig into RippleNet, which we do in some depth. We talk about what it is, who is using it, how banks are involved, and the use cases that are prevalent today. We talk about Swift and why RippleNet is a better solution than Swift. We delve into XRP and crypto as an asset class. We also talk about the new line of credit product that Ripple just recently introduced, which I found fascinating. We also talk about some of the hot issues of the day, central bank digital currencies, the growth of DeFi, and much more. It was a fascinating interview. Hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the podcast, Asheesh.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
Okay, my pleasure. I like to get these things started by giving the listeners some background. I know you've been at Ripple for many, many years, but why don't you give us some of the highlights of your career to date?
Yeah, so my story is I grew up in Michigan and went to the University of Michigan and studied computer science. Right after I graduated, the internet was taking off, and I thought, I need to be part of this movement. Mm-hmm. So I moved to San Francisco because that's where all the action was. And that was a launching pad for my career. The internet's taken off, new software engineer in Silicon Valley, and that was, tremendous. But, I was starting to think about, all right, well, what could be the next internet that can help me take the next, trajectory in my career? And, I thought you need to go to business school. So I went to, Wharton to, figure out what was next. And just at that time, the economy was cratering with the '08 crisis.
Right.
And at that exact same time, Bitcoin was created out of this economic crisis. And I started to learn about it really early. And then when in 2012, I started looking for this could be even more impactful than the internet, meaning blockchain. And I found Chris Larson at a Bitcoin sort of meetup or conference, early days, 2012. And I said, listen, if you ever start a company, Chris Larson's the founder of Ripple and founder of Prosper. I said, if you ever start a company in this space, let me know. And a couple months later, he said to him, I'm starting something in the cryptocurrency space. Why don't you come and be my head of product? And that's how the party got started. And that's how I got into crypto. And I haven't looked back. I've been at Ripple now for over 7 years.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, because obviously longtime listeners know Chris Larson well as the founder of Prosper, and he moved on many years ago. And I remember when he moved on from Prosper, and I asked him what was next, and he says, "I've got a couple of ideas." And then next thing you know, Ripple was born. And so maybe we could just take a step back and maybe why don't you describe Ripple? How do you describe Ripple today?
Yeah, so Ripple is a company that is building financial technology, and we are reinventing the way that money moves around the world. It's really, Chris talked about it the first day I started as the internet of value, mm-hmm. meaning Ripple is going to build software to help enable the internet of value. And we're doing that because, listen, the way that money moves today, the way that folks lend it today hasn't changed much fundamentally since the 1960s. And listen, now, companies are becoming global from day one. They have different kinds of needs that are different than the 1960s when folks were, not as global. And so, listen, using distributed blockchain technology and new decentralized financial technology, Ripple's been building something called RippleNet, which is a peer-to-peer, meaning bank-to-bank or financial institution to financial institution network to better enable. We started with moving money, and we'll talk a little bit on this podcast, a little bit about, hey, where we're heading next beyond moving money across borders, which I think is super exciting.
Right. So maybe, well, let's just dig into RippleNet because I think it's it's a super interesting concept. And so, and obviously, there's the way we've moved money around has, as you say, hasn't changed much. But how is it different to the existing system, and who's actually using it right now?
Yeah, great question. So, the way that money moves today, real quickly, is really 80% of cross-border flows go through three mega banks. That's HSBC, that's Citibank, that's JP Morgan, and you trust those banks to move money for you. I mean, it's they are the world leaders in really trust. And what's interesting about the way that Ripple started creating an alternative is that instead of trusting those financial institutions, why don't we link up smaller financial institutions and, in the future, maybe even corporations directly? And instead of trusting the banks to move money, why don't we trust the blockchain to move money cross borders? And so today, correspondent banks, if you want to move money into Mexico, they actually open an account in Mexico, they pre-position pesos, and they move money that way using something called mostly the SWIFT network.
Right.
But today, you can move digital assets into the country real time, and they get converted into local currency using cryptocurrency exchanges. And so, we started that journey years ago. We launched the cryptocurrency addition to RippleNet about 2 years ago. Today, MoneyGram is using that product. We have companies like Via Americas in the United States, a top 5 global remitter into Mexico from the US, Osmo in Europe. In fact, the traction has been so good that 10% of US dollar to Mexico, which is the largest corridor in the world for remittances, 10% of that now moves over blockchain technology, digital assets, and RippleNet. And so we've made a pretty big dent in that in just a few years after launching. So this is real. People are using it. It's far superior to the compared to the traditional world where there's tons of excess capital pre-positioned around the world just to facilitate payments, which is crazy. And that removes a lot of that because now you're trusting a digital asset. You're not trusting these large mega banks to move your money.
Right. And so what about what countries are you working in? I mean, is it the whole world now, or are you focusing on specific countries?
Right. Yeah. Great question. So like RippleNet enables you to use both fiat only, meaning there's no digital currency or cryptocurrency involved. And then in select corridors where we have the infrastructure available, you can use RippleNet and digital assets. And that product is known as ODL. And with the cryptocurrency product, you can send into, I believe, 3 destinations around the world. We're expanding that aggressively in 2020 and 2021. With the fiat only RippleNet, we are in all the major currencies now. I think we are in 45 different countries, 6 continents, and we have payout capabilities in 70 countries. Sorry, 45 countries is where we have customers. We can actually pay out into 70 countries with RippleNet, all together.
Right. Okay. And then who's actually using it? I mean, I imagine you're not really communicating with the end user. You're you're a B2B play, right, for the most part. Who is using it? What kinds of companies? What kinds of, you've mentioned MoneyGram, but who else is using it? Yeah,
so we have, they're fintechs or payment providers like Osmo, which is a leader, the second largest fintech remitter in the UK. right behind TransferWise. We have companies like Via Americas, they're in the top 5 for US dollar to Mexico remitters, a large company, very, very innovative, based in the United States. And then we have, folks that are part of our network, like Siam Commercial Bank in Thailand, which is the oldest, largest commercial bank. And they are one of our strongest partners in the region. So, you have a mix. We also are aggressively moving into, companies like, GoLance, which is a freelance e-commerce company that has needs to pay out freelancers around the world. And again, there's not a great solution for a company like that until there was something like RippleNet. So, we are really going after underserved companies that are innovating in their space.
Right. Okay. And so if you walk into a MoneyGram and you want to send money to Mexico, I mean, you got no idea that this is going over blockchain rails, right? What I'm really getting at, maybe you can, if you walk into a MoneyGram, maybe explain exactly how it works. Yes, you might be a Mexican American sending money to a family in Mexico. You walk into MoneyGram, you give them $500. What happens?
Yeah, with the MoneyGram, cash example. So if you're walking into a retail store, the experience for that customer is not really changing,
right?
Because MoneyGram today, they pre-position Mexican pesos, so they make it appear instant. What we're doing is reducing the cost for MoneyGram. They no longer have to pre-position pesos, which is called float or treasury in Mexico anymore, using RippleNet. Instead, they move it in real time. So it's sort of like this in the factory industrial space, it's called just in time. Well, money's moving just in time into Mexico, which is a big innovation for MoneyGram. Now, where it really comes into play is if you look at MoneyGram, their digital growth, sort of induced by COVID, has been growing gangbusters. Their stock is up as well, and because it's digital, they need real time movement of money. So that's where the efficiencies really come into play. Now you can actually move money real time using a mobile app in the United States into Mexico. And again, that's what's given birth to this entire industry from Asimo in the UK, again, enabling digital customers to download something from the App Store and get going and send money internationally in a matter of minutes. And I think that's really where we're seeing a lot of growth on RippleNet, enabling those kinds of customers and use cases.
Right. And obviously, Swift isn't standing still either. I know that I saw recently that they've got a new initiative designed to speed cross-border payments. I mean, maybe you can tell us why. I mean, if it's just speed, I mean, what's eventually Swift, I imagine, will be able to do real time as well. I mean, why is RippleNet better than Swift? Maybe we can just answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Swift is a consortium. It's not a for-profit company like Ripple is. So number one, we have our DNA is innovation and technology. The other thing is that Swift is really just messaging. And if you listen to our customers, the problem they have is partially messaging. And that's where RippleNet got started 5-6 years ago, was just the messaging only problem. Mm-hmm. But we then innovated further. We said, okay, now we're linking up all these financial institutions directly without an intermediary in solving the messaging problem. Let's go and solve that liquidity problem. Swift doesn't solve the liquidity problem. You still move money the old way by these, archaic relationships and pre-positioning money around the world. That's where we started adding in the ODL product. It's called on-demand liquidity.
Right.
Leveraging digital assets to move money in real time. And that removes the $1 trillion afloat that's pre-positioned around the world just for cross-border payments. And again, that was the first innovation beyond, messaging. Now, we'll talk a little bit about lending coming up as well. Again, adding more and more to our arsenal and product suite, leaving Swift behind as the messaging only problem. So yeah, by the time they upgrade all their banks by 2030, hopefully we'll have, several, additional innovations that we've added to our arsenal already.
Right. Well, let's talk about that credit product, because that was really an interesting innovation and what really prompted this whole conversation. You've got it. You just announced last month that you have a new line of credit product. Who is it for, and how does it work?
Yeah. So, well, as we're learning in this journey, we started just talking like, good product folks talk to their customers. And we started realizing that our customers use, one set of partners for payments. And then I started realizing that, listen, they actually get a line of credit from other banking partners. And I'm like, wait, why do you guys need a line of credit? And they, part of it was because their customers want real-time payments, but the money doesn't come in from customers for 2 to 3 days a lot of times, but the customer wants to send those payments right away as soon as they get the app. Mm-hmm. So they're out money for 2 to 3 days. And, these fast growing fintechs, they don't want to use their venture capital money to float the 2 to 3 days. So they started borrowing from traditional lenders. And what I realized is that these traditional lenders, they're really good at giving line of credits to construction companies. And they're not great at, lending to fintech companies. So I thought, well, Ripple can potentially solve this by not only offering the cross-border payment, but we can also give them a little bit of capital for the 2 to 3 days and charge them for it. Mm-hmm. And so we're really, I realized we're really one of the only companies that can do the payment, but also do the line of credit all in one product and all in one experience for our customers. And I thought, well, hey, this is starting with just our existing customers. But now I'm realizing that, listen, there's a whole other segment around e-commerce that needs the same exact thing. And if you're talking about Southeast Asia, for example, the US is, they have some options. If you're talking about Southeast Asia, that is growing gangbusters, and there's not great credit facilities in that market.
Right.
And so, you're an expert here as well. So, I think I'm realizing the opportunity here is a lot bigger than I initially thought.
Right. Then you talk about trade finance. Trade finance is trillions of dollars every year, and that's something that I can see, something like this happening. So are you funding these lines of credit off your own balance sheet, or how are you doing it?
Yeah. So the initial product, and just to get the experience right, is funding it off of our own balance sheet. And in the future, you can think about innovations that you're potentially seeing in the decentralized finance space, otherwise known as DeFi, to open this up to others to potentially provide the capital, more of an open marketplace using cryptocurrencies and digital assets. And so, yeah, we're starting right now by leveraging our own balance sheet. Let's get that experience right, and then when we scale it, we can potentially offer this to other lenders as well. And trade finance, for example, you hit it. There's all sorts of new trade finance enabled by e-commerce that I didn't even realize. Merchants that want money faster, that to go and invest in their business, and then the traditional trade financing space as well. And again, we are probably getting a lead or two a day from companies learning about this that we're trying to figure out, well, is that the right segment to play in, or is it, should we go into this segment? What region around the world is the most underserved? So you definitely hit on something that's top of mind for me.
Right. And then do you give it to anybody? Or do you underwrite these customers to make sure that they're, this is a legitimate transaction? How are you deciding whether or not to provide this line of credit?
Right. Yeah. I think right now we are really early days. Right. We are, the good thing is that we're starting with our customers, and we know our customers. We know they've been around for a long time. They have a very strong balance sheet, and they also have a good business. So, we feel good about trying to learn by leveraging this almost in the exact same product flow we have today, and start, building out the risk models, so that we can go into other segments as well. But short answer is we're starting with our own customers. We're doing a quick risk assessment, and we're taking it slow to build up this product expertise in-house.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned DeFi, and I want to talk about that because it's seen pretty explosive growth this year. And I think just, beyond your line of credit product, I'm just thinking about how you view the DeFi space in general. Obviously, you're talking about lending via smart contracts, like MakerDAOs. I know one of the big ones. How are you, and how do you personally, and how's Ripple viewing this explosion in the DeFi space this year?
Yeah, I mean, this has been something that I've personally been tracking for 2 to 3 years. Folks always looked at smart contracts. What is this thing going to be good for? I mean,
Right.
why do you need smart contracts in the first place? And there are all sorts of different use cases very early on, maybe 3 or 4 years ago with smart contracts. But this was one, lending in particular was one I felt like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. Now you can lend to folks without an intermediary. And so it started making a lot of sense, real-time capital that you can use, in a transaction and repay it back in seconds. That's something you can't do with the traditional world that you could potentially do with the DeFi. The problem I think that DeFi needs to solve to really grow is that there really isn't a credit model or an identity model.
Mm-hmm.
It is all anonymous at this point. And I feel like, that's why you need this, to actually borrow, you need to heavily over collateralize the loan. So, I think that until they figure out a model that, involves identity and risk, it's probably going to have, decent growth, but can't really get to the kind of global growth for enterprise use cases that I would want to see until that's solved. But I think that's going to come. I just think that, you're in super, super early, you're almost in the warm up of a game, not even early innings,
right.
In terms of DeFi. And I think it's super exciting. It is going to be a big space, no doubt. I just think that like a lot of things, it's probably going to be a lot longer than folks anticipate to see some mainstream use cases emerge there. But it's fascinating. I've been following it for a long time.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So I want to talk about XRP, the Ripple kind of the crypto, and your reviews. I mean, I've been following the space. I own a few thousand XRP that I bought back in I think it was 2016. And I wanted to, obviously crypto, I just saw the Bitcoin's gone over 15,000 today. We're recording this just on November 5th, just to make sure we clarify that. But what's your view about the crypto space in general and XRP specifically?
Yeah, so I think what you're starting to see in the crypto space is that at the beginning, when I joined Ripple, there was only a few of them, and everyone was going after the same use cases. Everyone was going after payments. And I think what you're seeing now is that, hold on, Bitcoin is really not going after payments. I don't see folks really leveraging Bitcoin after going after payments, but it's actually a pretty innovative alternative to gold. Mm-hmm. And when you see market uncertainty like you're seeing today with the Fed and other central banks printing money, it could be this safe haven like gold was or is today. So, I think you're seeing that use case emerge there. With XRP, that digital asset that Ripple leverages for its cross-border flows, it was created for payments. I think you're seeing it being a very, very conduit to a more efficient global payment system. So I think you're seeing that, that huge space take off for XRP. And then with Ethereum, you're seeing Ether fuel the decentralized finance, a smart contract space. Mm-hmm. And so, I think it's great. I think that, you are seeing now use cases and sort of these different digital assets specialize. And guess what? Finance is a massive, massive space. So there's room for a lot of them. I think the days that folks believe that there's only going to be Bitcoin, I think are over. I think it's clear that there are going to be a lot of digital assets, and there's going to be a lot more, maybe traditional assets that are going to be tokenized as digital assets, which is exciting. You're seeing fiat and stablecoins take off as an example of that. But I think you're going to see more and more things in the traditional world represent themselves as tokens on a blockchain, which I think is going to add a lot of efficiency too. So I'm really bullish. Obviously, you could have had this podcast maybe a year ago, and you're in the dog days of digital assets where no one cared about the space anymore. You're seeing it come back red hot again. Interesting enough, I don't see the traditional venture capitalists as interested as they were in 2017. Right. But I think in my mind, I think I couldn't be happier in terms of the innovation in the space.
Right. Interesting. So, and speaking of innovation in the space, I want to talk about central bank digital currencies, because it seems like there's been a lot of, it started off, I think, last year. I mean, really, I think Libra, was really the thing that kind of kicked off this conversation. And now you've got many, I mean, even the US central bank is saying that they're looking at it. You've got, the Chinese central bank have it in pilot even as we speak, and many others around the world, many other central bankers have said, we're looking at it in really developed countries like UK, Canada, etc. So, like, what do you think that's? I mean, it feels to me that it's inevitable that eventually, if you go out long enough, it's all going to be a digital currency. But love to get your perspective on it, and particularly what it might mean for Ripple.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I've been looking at CBDCs for a long time. What China is doing with CBDCs, and if you're following the Ant Financial whole, we're doing an IPO, and then China saying, no, you're not. I think they're related. Yeah. And I think what China wants to do with the CBDCs is that, listen, this is going to be how money moves using the RMB. And listen, like it could be an identity layer. I know where folks are paying. I know where folks are earning now. So, it's reform taxation. But also, could this be a ploy for China to also replace the US dollar as the world's, reserve currency? Mm-hmm. And so I think that China is blazing ahead here. I don't think that they care as much as the rest of the world does about, disrupting the commercial sector. So they are like, Ant Financial being a classic case, they are blazing ahead with this. I think that everyone else is going to play catch up, to be honest. I think it's going to take you don't have the same sort of centralized function that China does. The interesting thing here is that it has nothing to do with blockchain. If you read, CBDCs with China, they're using a centralized solution. Right. And so that's where I think you can, RippleNet can actually take these local CBDCs and bridge them to make money move more efficiently. So I think that it's a very good thing for companies like Ripple. We're already positioned well in building out this decentralized network called RippleNet. Now, if we can start linking these domestic CBDCs, we can make it even more efficient. And I think if you look at it right now, one of the hardest things that we have to do is connecting the last mile. How do you get the money to the people that need it in the Philippines? Right. It's still scooters and delivery if you have pawn shops, if you believe it. But if you had CBDCs delivery into your mobile phone, like they're thinking about in China, all of a sudden the last mile, gets solved. So I think the whole space is pretty fascinating. Let's see if China gets off the ground in 2021 like they do. If so, it's off to the races, I think, for the rest of the world. Right. And obviously, China doesn't have as many. They don't really care as much about privacy, and which is, I think, one of the big challenges, because cash is completely anonymous, and that's where I think there's going to be resistance. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see how it develops. But I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it with the cash piece and the privacy piece. I think that I think they want to track, which is completely different than the rest of the world. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, a couple more things. We're running out of time, but I want to get to something your CEO said recently, talking about moving your headquarters out of this country. You cited, the lack of sort of regulatory innovation. What do you see from your perspective? What should the regulators be doing in this country that they're not doing? Yeah, so it goes back to that story that I told, at the beginning, is like, they nailed it with, not regulating the internet or with the right kind of policies. And as a result, if you look out my window, you can see, Twitter and all these companies innovating in the United States because the policy was a really, really good policy to govern the internet. And with cryptocurrencies, they've really taken taken sort of a lackadaisical approach, and not only with cryptocurrencies and blockchain, but also with fintech in general. If you want to get regulated in the United States, you have to go to 50 different states, each applying. It's $2 million in licensing to become a money transmitter in the United States. So you raise the bar. Whereas in Singapore or the UK, they've come out with clear digital asset blockchain regulation. They've streamlined how to become a fintech in those countries. I think MES in Singapore is doing a fabulous job with both. And so if you want to innovate, they're going to attract companies that want to innovate, just like the United States did with the internet. So it's unfortunate. And hence, Ripple and companies like Ripple that want to innovate in the blockchain space, I'm not so sure. And I think our CEO is also, have said similar things, is that it's super clear how to move forward in the United States. Right. And folks want certainty. And I think that's only natural. So I think that's, some of the background on Brad, our CEO's comments.
Right. Okay, fair enough. So last question. I'd love to get your sense on the vision for Ripple and what's coming down the track. I mean, it's exciting, all the different things you're working on, and it feels like there's so many trends that seem to be kind of coming together that will help Ripple. But what is your vision? What's down the track for you guys? Yeah.
So. I think we are going to continue to build out RippleNet. So the more customers, the more partners we have as part of RippleNet, that is, the moat. That is really our, distributing this to all the different folks around the world. I think continuing to do that, we are going to continue to expand ODL, on-demand liquidity. I mentioned it's in a few countries as, destinations. We want to get global coverage of that where possible by the regulators. And then, lending is just one example of other products that we can offer our RippleNet customers that solve real problems for them. And, I think there are other areas as well where, listen, you get lending down, you get payments down, that opens up a lot of other, white space for us to innovate in as well. One in particular is e-commerce. I think with COVID, you've seen an explosion in growth of e-commerce. I don't think you have the right kind of financial infrastructure to support those kinds of companies. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to in terms of innovating and building for in the upcoming year.
Okay, well, it's really super interesting what you guys are doing. Asheesh, I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Peter, thanks so much for your time and really great questions. You can tell you're an expert in the space that keeps reinventing itself, I think, every 4 or 5 years, which is great.
Okay, thanks. See ya. We didn't talk that much in this interview about blockchain technology, and that was deliberate. I mean, from my perspective, while blockchain had its hype period a couple of years ago, it's really now all about what can the technology do. It's really about what is the use case that makes life better for a small business or for a consumer. And as you can see in this interview, we went through several use cases about why having RippleNet is a better solution than what we have currently today. And I think it's inevitable that we're going to be able to move money around quickly internationally. It's going to be effortless, and it already is, obviously, with a lot of things that Ripple are doing. But for anyone who thinks that we're going to be doing wires here internationally and take a day or two to receive that money, we're not going to be doing that at the end of this decade. We are going to switch during this decade to a much more efficient and much better way of moving money around. And I happen to think Ripple will be right at the center of that. Anyway, on that note, I will sign off. I very much appreciate you listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye. Today's episode was sponsored by Lendit Fintech LATAM. The region's largest fintech event dedicated to lending and digital banking is going virtual. It's happening online on December 8th and 9th. Pandemic or not, LATAM is still the hottest region for fintech in the world, and Lendit Fintech LATAM features all the leading players in the region. So join the LATAM FinTech community online this year, where you'll meet the people who matter, learn from the experts, and get business done. Lend it FinTech, lending and banking connected. Sign up today at lendit.com/LATAM.